I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Everything I do so instinctive.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, degenerate sleuths of the night. We gather to boldly go where others have refused. Welcome to the DT show, you salty mofos.
A man accused of killing 4 college students is behind bars, and he has ties to northeastern and central Pennsylvania. State police say 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger was arrested this morning at a home in Chestnut Hill Township.
I can't find any case law that would support that idea. That somehow a warrant would be needed for DNA left at a crime scene.
We are expected to learn more about the allegations against the girlfriend of a Boston police officer who was found unresponsive in the snow Saturday morning. I-Team sources say Karen Reed was in a relationship with John O'Keefe. She's facing charges including motor vehicle homicide and manslaughter.
So, the Commonwealth just provided the court with information that causes me grave concern. The implications of that information may have profound effects on this defense and defense counsel.
So, get your popcorn ready and your choice of drink. Get your butt on your seat. Like, comment, and subscribe for a treat. Here we go. It's time for the show. The Drunk Turkey Show.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. We got a great show today. We got some great news coming in from Ada County and out there in Boise, referencing the Bryan Kohberger case. We're going to be talking about that. Before we get into today's show, we actually have a couple of sponsors for today's episode that I got to talk about. First one's with Data Seal, guys. They've been partnered with us for a long time. So if you're concerned about your privacy or personal information out there on the interwebs, make sure to check out the link down below. They'll get your name, phone number, voting reference, preference, religious preference, all of those things scrubbed off the interwebs, get a 5% discount. Also, we have a little short thing we're going to watch real quick about TST bike. Hey, everybody, check out this bike that TST has dropped. It's a TST R002 e-bike out just in time for summer. And we got a discount code for you guys. Go to the website in the description. It's also going to be in the comment section. When you get out there, hit the discount code DT Show. Get $100 off on this e-bike. Amazing bike, the TST R002 e-bike from TST GRP LLC. Great bike, guys. I had it for a couple of days. Goes up to about 32 miles an hour, 65-mile battery. It can carry up to 400 pounds. You guys won't be disappointed. Link is in the description. All righty. With all the bills paid and sponsors out of the way, let's get into today's conversation. So there was a document that were dropped in the Bryan Kohberger case, finally announcing the judge's decision on the continuance and alternate perpetrator. And we're going to go through all of the documents that were dropped. I think there's some good bits of information in them, and some things that I like what the judge said. And so we'll go through it. So the first document that dropped was a defendant's 24th supplement request for discovery. Now, there was a motion to seal and a motion granted on that. So we don't know exactly what it is that they're requesting for discovery, but I want you guys to take note that this is the 24th supplemental request for discovery. And Taylor and the defense team have kind of alluded that there was, I don't know, some sort of prosecutor misconduct in the way that they've been giving away or the way they've been handing out evidence, etc. Well, let's just keep this in mind as we read through the documents, because I think Judge Hippler actually kind of talks a little bit about the amount of discovery that's come in and in the manner that it's come in. But before we start again, like, comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell button, guys. All righty. So the first one we're going to talk about is the redacted order on the defendant's offer of proof referencing the alternate perpetrator. So these are the other guys, y'all. These are the people that Ann Taylor was wanting to bring in by name and say that they had something to do with the crime. So let's go into it. So introduction states that the state previously moved in limine seeking to preclude the defendant from offering and arguing alternative perpetrator evidence without first satisfying the applicable evidentiary standards. The defendant filed his offer of proof and evidence in support, identifying 4 individuals as potential alternate perpetrators. Now, they don't go, into too much detail about who these individuals are, but there's a little bit of clues there. We'll talk about it. I'm pretty sure we can kind of figure out who they were pointing towards, so to speak. And I'll give you guys my thoughts on it. I told you guys on a few of them. Maybe good old psychic Daniel comes through. Let's see. The state objects to the presentation of this evidence at trial, arguing it fails to satisfy the standard under State v. Meister. Defendant conceded at oral argument that at this point, his proffer is not sufficient to pursue an alternative perpetrator theory out at the onset of trial. So we've all were curious as to why it was sealed. Judge Hippler didn't want so much. He wanted more transparency. Didn't want so much stuff sealed. And then all of a sudden, there's a lot of things sealed referencing this alternate perpetrator. Now, we've heard alternate perpetrator theories in other cases before, and the defense has not wanted that to be sealed. Now, I guess this is the reason they conceded at the oral argument that his proffer is not sufficient to pursue an alternate perpetrator theory. So that's the whole purpose behind it, was being sealed. But let's continue. This goes on to say, but requests latitude and cross-examination of the state's witness to establish additional evidence that satisfy Meister's standard, which obviously that's a given. They're going to allow them to cross-examine maybe perhaps police witnesses or police officers, investigators, federal agency investigators, those kind of guys and gals, to see if they did their job correctly. Did they cross all their T's and dot their I's, so to speak? But they're not going to be allowed to bring in a specific person and say, hey, it was such and such, without any proof or evidence. All right, the court concludes that at this time, the defendant's alternate perpetrator proffer is inadmissible under Meister and is irrelevant or excluded by IRE 403. However, this does not foreclose the defendant from cross-examining law enforcement regarding the reasonableness of the investigation and follow-up on plausible leads. Basically what I just said right there. Okay, so let's continue the analysis. The defendant wishing to present such evidence at trial had to first present proof of a connection with the crime with such train of facts and circumstances as tend clearly to point out someone besides the accused as the guilty party. Remote access, disconnected and outside of the crime itself, cannot separately prove for such a purpose. If the defendant proffers evidence which merely tends to mislead the jury that another person committed the crime, where the evidence is not relevant because it does not tend to make the defendant's involvements more plausible or less plausible, meaning, like, for instance, how does, I've said it before, I told you guys they were going to try to target Jack Decor. They were going to say that he was going to be a guy. So one of the things that they're going to, one of the things that could be said is that he was out there with the victims. He was at the corner club with the victims that night, and he was the person that the victims were calling, close to 3 a.m. Okay. How does the knife sheath without his DNA and the DNA of Bryan Kohberger match? How does the white Elantra that's being driven around in a suspicious manner and pulled into a one-way in, one-way out area? Because when you pull into that King Queen Road intersection, that's the only, you pull in there, that's the only way you can come out. You can go around the apartment complex all you want, but if you're going to leave that neighborhood or that portion of that neighborhood, you have to go through there. And so that vehicle goes in, one way out, acting very suspicious before the alleged time that the intruder makes entry. During the time that the intruder has made entry, that white Elantra has pulled into the area and is no longer in view until 4:20, when it's seen traveling at a high rate of speed after law enforcement believed that the crime was committed. So, how do you play those things? How do those factors in, or how does that factor in with like Jack DeCore, who doesn't drive an Elantra, who lived within walking distance, who is probably seen going home on camera throughout the night? Remember, one of the things that they argued, and they being the defense, is the amount of evidence that they have. And a lot of that evidence is going to be footage that is not of relevant time, right? It'll be from all these different cameras for different hours and for long periods of time. And one of those that we know about is the 1122 King Road residence. Now the 1112 King Road residence, which is the next door neighbor, the light camera. Now we know that it picks up the Elantra going through there a few times. I'm sure it's going to pick up Jack when he goes home. You know what I'm saying? And that camera's facing that intersection. It doesn't see anybody walking up. Oh, yeah, somebody's going to say maybe he jumped the fences and when came across, but there was still some snow back there. You know, when it comes to wintertime and when it comes to snow in that area, if you notice the topography of the area, it's on a bit of a hill, and where the sun hits, that back area is not very well lit by the sun. And so there's a lot of shade back there throughout the day. And so that's what would eliminate a lot of the snow. And if you look at some of the footage that they had there, I think they had even a drone footage at one point, you can see snow in the back area. So you would have seen if somebody would have crawled back there or went and jumped over the fences and things of that nature. So there's also supposedly, and this according to Steve, they looked at his phone, which I think that's 100% true. Jack DeCore handed over his phone, and they were able to determine throughout the time that the crimes were occurring that his phone may have moved a little bit, maybe because it was under his pillow, whatever, and him just shifting positions in bed. They were able to account for him throughout the entire night. So how do you implement those things into saying that he is a suspect merely because he lives close and he was also the person that had seen him while at the corner club, and they called him? I mean, there's no connection there. So that's why another reason why they didn't allow this. So mere inferences that another person could have committed the crime will most likely not be relevant, and if relevant, will still be subject to limitation provisions of IRE 403. A defendant has no right to present irrelevant evidence. Even if the evidence is relevant, it may be excluded in certain cases. Here, the evidence the defendant has offered purporting to establish the four individuals as alternate perpetrators objectively fall to meet Meister standard. Namely, the evidence is entirely irrelevant. Nothing links these individuals to the homicides or otherwise gives rise to a reasonable inference that they could have committed the crime. Indeed, it would take nothing short of rank speculation by the jury to find such a finding. Three of the individuals, and this says two, so let's go down to, never mind. There's a lot of redactions in this. All right, so hold on, where was I? Three of the individuals were each socially connected to one or more of the victims, interacted with one or more of the victims at social events in the hours prior to the homicides. So who do we have, right? You have Jack DeCore, who was somebody that lived close, and you had some people that were there. Maybe they were trying to loop in Adam, because remember Adam said everything. What did you tell Adam? Maybe that was another person that they wanted to look into. And then probably hoodie guy, Jack S. You know, he knew them. They all went to school together. I'm sure that they were connected in some sort of social events, as this means. So I wouldn't be surprised if those are three of the individuals. And then he goes on to say, but all three of these lived within walking distance of the crime scene. So obviously Jack DeCore is one of them. I don't know where Showalter lives. Who did I say was the other guy? Probably number 9, Joey Burrow from the Grub Truck, or Adam. Adam, yeah. In fact, I think Adam does live with. Didn't Adam live with Jack? So that probably is one of the other ones, because they lived in walking distance. I don't know where Jack Showalter lives. That one escapes me. But yeah, I mean, Hunter. Somebody says Hunter, maybe. I mean, Hunter did he was staying within walking distance. He was the person to find the bodies. Could they have tried to use him as a person that they were going to see him as an alternate suspect? He did come out in a couple of, he was in both of the 911 calls with the video, the one at night where nobody's there, and then the one in the daytime where Kaylee brings the officers, or the officers go around to the back and Kaylee's out there, and then there's Hunter with the zip ties on his wrist. Could have been Hunter. He could have definitely been one. But I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I think these are the guys that they were targeting. They live within walking distance. Those guys did. Could very much be them. And we're familiar with the layout of the victim's home from prior social events. So even more so, we've seen Hunter there at the house. I'm sure Adam's probably been at the house, and so is Jack Decor. And so we're probably thinking that these are the guys that they are. You're probably thinking Adam, Jack, and Hunter, because they all lived right there. They all been inside the house. They all were familiar with them. And so that's what I'm thinking it is. Well, perhaps this evidence could suggest an opportunity to commit the crime, which no doubt is an opportunity shared by dozens of others in the victims and social circles. There is no compelling evidence of that any of them had any motive to kill the victims, much less physically harm them, or means to do so. So yeah, like for instance, let's kind of go through motive on it. So when it comes to the motive aspect, a lot of people might look at Jack Decor because he was the ex-boyfriend. But one of the things that what he had told, or what that whole story about, I told Adam everything, surrounded by Kaylee wanting to get back with Jack. Kaylee was wanting to get back with Jack. Apparently the messages that were left, and some of those were, Kaylee talking to Jack about getting back together, that they shared a dog together. So this thought kind of goes out the window when you say, oh, well, he was upset that she was leaving and taking the dog with her and didn't want to be with him anymore. She's the one that wanted to get back with him. So that theory kind of goes out the window. When it comes to the other people, the other individuals, there's no reason for them to want to harm them. And when it comes to the means, the means is important. And what means is more than just capability of wielding a knife, right? What the means is that the person was capable of going in there, leaving little to no DNA behind, able to get out of there, be able to go swiftly through the house, and take out four beautiful people in the middle of the night without leaving any evidence for the most part. I mean, he left the knife sheath, but if it weren't for that, prosecution and state would be in quite a bit of trouble, in my opinion. And so, the quietness, you had most of these individuals were out that night at the bar, so they were probably drunk. Drunk individuals, or people that are under the influence of an intoxication, don't go into a crime scene, and not leave DNA behind or make mistakes, right? And the reason why I say that is because, usually people start sweating more and those type of things, and not really thinking straight. Movement can be delayed, those type of things. It's not, those type of things are messy. If you had somebody who was love drunk or sick and was mad and upset because his girlfriend was leaving him, you would hear the sounds of rage coming from that video from 50 feet away. You'd hear this guy losing his mind, saying, how could you do this to me? Blah, 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 slamming doors, breaking things. I mean, a lot of people say also with the roid rage, you would hear the sounds of somebody losing their mind if they're willing to go through 4 people, right? Because of something that they almost got in a fight with at Sigma Chi. So if they almost got in a fight at Sigma Chi, and this guy was willing to harm Ethan in front of everybody, it doesn't really jive with this person driving around 3 times, going in silently, no force entry. That doesn't jive with rage, whether it be drug-induced rage, alcoholic, jealous rage, or just rage in general. Those things don't jive together. That's not evidence of each other. And so the means aspect of it, I think, is important. Somebody went in there with before-hand knowledge to leave all the doors open, and mainly because they knew that how many times they touched the door was going to result with a more likely chance for him to leave DNA behind, especially on the way out. You touch the door once, when you open it, you go in there and you commit the crime. You've exerted yourself. You've started to sweat. You've started to breathe heavier. Now you got to go back to that door and open it again to get out. Well, now there's a good chance that you're going to leave your DNA behind. So if you just left it open the entire time, you can go in and out. That took a lot of forethought to do something like that. That's not something that somebody does, when it comes to like a crime of passion or in the moment type of crime. That takes, forethought to do. All right, so let's continue this. There's no compelling evidence that any of them had any motive, much less physical harm them, or means to do so. Further, there is no evidence connecting them to the crime scene. They have each cooperated with law enforcement, providing DNA samples, fingerprints, and allowing searches as requested. Notably, lab testing has excluded their DNA from samples taken from the crime scene and the victims. The fourth individual did not know the victims, but had a passing connection to one of them while noticing her shopping at a store approximately 5 weeks prior to the homicides. Followed her briefly out of the exit of the store. While considering approaching her to talk, he turned away before ever speaking to her. That event was captured on surveillance camera. This individual subsequently cooperated with law enforcement, providing his phone number and DNA sample. As with other alleged alternative perpetrators, lab reports excluded his DNA from the samples taken from the crime scene and the victims, and there is no evidence connecting him to the crime scene. And so you notice it says samples taken from the crime scene and the victims. Now, we do know that Maddie had some unknown DNA underneath her fingernails. So we can probably say that they probably tested it with CODIS. Maybe they couldn't get anything in there or not. Maybe they only had a really small amount. But that amount they could probably try to test to see if it would be somewhat similar to some of these other individuals. And they all came back negative. And so even all these people now, who this fourth individual is the so-called stalker, right? Now, I know about this incident. I've talked to Christy and Steve about the incident, and what they had told me was that Bethany and Kaylee had gone to the store. Bethany stayed in the car. Kaylee went in to purchase some alcoholic beverages. She ends up, going through the store, and as she's leaving, she noticed somebody's following her. They follow her to her car. She gets in her car. She hurries up to get to her car because she notices the guy's kind of following her close. And at one point when she looked around, she said the guy kind of looked like he dipped behind a car. So that's what kind of freaked her out, was the guy kind of, I guess she turned around and he freaked him out, and he kind of just like, was like, trying to turn around and like do type of thing, like pretend he wasn't doing what he was trying to do. And so, which was going to ask for her number. And he just didn't have the nerve. So he turned around and walked away. He was identified. They talked to him. The very vague description that Dylan talks about, the height of the suspect, the weight of the suspect, the race of the suspect, none of those match the person that was at the store. And so you see, that's why I say when it comes to what Dylan says, it's not necessarily that she's pointing Bryan Kohberger and you're saying, man, based on that description that she has, she's described Bryan Kohberger. That's not the case. What it is that you have a guy that left DNA behind that matches Bryan Kohberger, and you have a person that saw the perpetrator in the house that doesn't exclude Kohberger, and then you have a vehicle that matches his down to the front license plate being removed or missing, traveling around the area multiple times. So you have more than just one thing. Plus, his phone was off during that specific odd hour. And he himself has stated that throughout the night, he was by himself in his car. So nobody else had his car. Nobody else was with him. He wasn't out doing drug deals, and he was just the guy that was watching. No, he has admitted that he was by himself in his car. Nobody else had possession of his car. Nobody else was inside his car. So those were the things that he had agreed to. All righty. Says here, the fact that these individuals lived within walking distance from the crime scene is not probative evidence, given that the perpetrator drove a vehicle to the crime scene. Further, none of these individuals drove a vehicle matching the description of the suspected killers. I want to say thank you to Wicked Curves gifting 5 Drunk Turkey Show memberships. I'm going to put a link into after the show for those that got it to the Discord. That way you can be part of the conversation. It's for members only. But you do have to keep up with your membership because we do go through there every now and then, and we will purge out those that are no longer members. So you do need to be still part of the membership and stay part of the membership to be part of the Discord. But while you're a member, you have full access to it. So the link will be in there a little bit later on in the evening. All right, let's continue this. So collectively, the defendants proffer with regard to these four individuals fail to give rise, even an inference that they committed the crimes or otherwise make it more or less likely that the defendant was the perpetrator. Therefore, it is irrelevant under IRE 401. Defendant has provided no probative, admissible, significant evidence of motive, ill feelings, means, presence at the scene, or any other connections of the crime that could possibly move the ball to the extent that supports an alternate perpetrator theory. At best, the defendant offers proof that can give rise only to wild speculation that is possible of any one of these four individuals could have committed the crimes, which is inadequate under Meister. And so he goes on to say, even if there was a shred of probative value in the proffered evidence beyond wild speculation is excluded under IRE 403. It is not sufficient for the defendant merely to offer up unsupportive speculation that another person may have done the crime. Such speculative blaming intensifies the grave risk of jury confusion, and it invites the jury to render its findings based on emotion or prejudice. Presentation of proffered alternate perpetrators' evidence would pose a great threat of confusing the issues because it was forced the state and to defend against nebulous allegations that perhaps these individuals were involved. This foray would lead the jury astray, turning its focus away from whether the defendant, the only person whose actions are on trial, committed the charged crimes. It also presents a threat of unfair prejudice, as it would invite the jury to blame unrepresented persons for a heinous crime when there is not a scintilla of competent evidence connecting them to the crime. Finally, it would be nothing more than a waste of precious time of the jury and the court in what has already a scheduled 3-month trial. Nonetheless, the court's ruling does not preclude the defendant from confronting and cross-examining the state's law enforcement witnesses regarding thoroughness of the investigation, particularly in the following up on and ruling out leads generally. Order: based on the foregoing, the defendant's offer of proof referencing alternate perpetrator is denied. I love Judge Hippler, man. I think he's a awesome judge, fair judge, and I think he sees past the BS, man. He calls them out in the next one that we're going to read, and more power to him for it. You know what I'm saying? We'll close that one. We'll close this one. All right. So, somebody got a good question. What was the question from Mountain Guy? What does Anne have left? Saying Bryan was framed. Well, she kind of threw that out already once, right? She kind of said that the knife sheath was placed and had this alluding that it was some sort of frame job. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's next, guys. When that's all you have left, and that should tell you how weak of a case you have if you're going to the police framed me theory. But when you don't have a case and that's all that's left, that's all that's left. All right, let's continue. This is the redacted memorandum decision and order for the defendant's motion to continue. Now, there's a lot of stuff in here that's redacted in this one. A lot of stuff. But we'll start. Before the court is the defendant's motion to continue the trial in this matter. The basis for the motion is threefold. First, he asserts that the volume of the discovery continues to pose a challenge to the counsel's ability to timely and meaningfully review all of it. Second, he asserts that there is a penalty phase investigation and a preparation that still needs to be done. Third, he asserts that the recent and forthcoming publicity in this case is highly prejudicial. The court finds a continuance is not warranted as the defendant has not made a showing that there is good cause to continue the trial on the substantial rights will be prejudiced by the preceding trial as scheduled. So right off the bat, he just says, no, it's not going to happen. But then he does break it down, and he breaks it down for everybody. He talks about here, the footnote says defendant filed some of his supporting materials in ex parte. While the court is not convinced that much of this filing is necessary or appropriate to be treated as ex parte, the court will nevertheless, in an abundance of caution, issue a redacted and unredacted version of this order. The state only receiving the redacted version, given that the court is denying the defendant's motion. All right. So the analysis: under Idaho law, criminal defendant seeking a continuance of trial must demonstrate his or her substantial rights will be prejudiced to the continuance. Thank you so much, Lonnie Carter. Thank you. There are no mechanical tests for deciding when a denial of continuance is arbitrary as to violate due process. The answer must be found in the circumstances present in every case, particularly in the reasons presented in trial. Judge at the time of request is denied. Where a continuance is sought based on late discovery or discovery of evidence, the alleged tardiness of discovery must be shown to so prejudice the defendant's case preparation that a fair trial will be denied. The bare claim that additional investigation could have been conducted is not sufficient to demonstrate unfair prejudice as to the support of the notion of continuance. Additionally, where a continuance is sought for potential receipt of evidence from further investigation, the motion properly denied is based on speculation. Defendant argues that a continuance is necessary for him to sufficiently review relevant discovery, conduct a full and complete investigation and mitigation evidence, particularly claimed newly revealed evidence that allegedly raises red flags. And he puts that in quotations, red flags. I see that as like a sarcastic statement. He's like, oh, now you have some red flags. You know, that's the way I read it. You guys let me know. Is that the way you guys are reading this? Red flags in quotations, because I'm reading it that way. And remedy the prejudice caused by the recent upcoming inflammatory publicity that alleged leak of information to the media. Moving forward with trial, he warns will violate his rights under the United States and Idaho constitutions to due process, to be free from cruel and unusual punishment, to a fair trial, to effective counsel, and to present the defense and confrontation witnesses and be fair and reliable sentencing determination. Absent of the defendant's materials, however, is any good cause for the continuance or legitimate showing of prejudice should the trial proceed as scheduled. So kind of just knocking them down, right? Just cutting them off at the knees right away. The defendant has not demonstrated a continuance as warrant to review discovery. The defendant first contends that the vast amount of discovery in this case renders it impossible for the defense team to review the necessary relevant discovery in this manner and allows it for it to be comprehensively integrated into his defense. He further argues without any support or explanation that there are a myriad of issues. And again, quotations, there are a myriad of issues that continue to arise from the state failing to comply with the discovery and expert disclosure deadlines. And there's a little number 3 here. What does number 3 say? The 3, and I love this, the defendant continues to complain of the state's discovery violations. And he puts that in quotations. But to be clear, this court has found no such violations by the state. No violations by the state, yet they continue to complain about these discovery violations. I like the way he breaks everything down here. He's calling out their bull crap, you know, and good for him, man. I think he's a strong judge. I think he sees the crap that's being trying to be pulled in front of the world and in front of himself and in his courtroom. Doing away with it. The court, however, rejected the same argument 2 months ago when the defendant sought to strike the death penalty and impose discovery obligations upon the state. In its order, the court observed the utter lack of proof supporting the defendant's accusations of discovery violations by the state. More importantly, the court found the defendant's complaints of being unable to meaningfully review the discovery entirely unconvincing. Pointing out that the counsel struggled to articulate in any meaningful way what evidence, let alone relevant evidence, counsel has been able to review over the past 2+ years. It's true. He's saying they've had a long time here, and why efforts to facilitate discovery review were not made long ago through this court and or the resource judge. The defendant's second round of this argument fares no better. He again fails to identify any relevant discovery that his counsel has yet to review. He also fails to identify any steps the counsel has taken, particularly since the court's prior order, to aid in the processing of yet unreviewed discovery. Moreover, he does not explain why he waited to seek the continuance until after discovery closed. Expert disclosure deadlines passed and the pretrial conference occurred. So he's questioning why they waited to do this so long. So he's basically laying out that he believes what they're doing is a stall tactic. I agree with him. That's all it's been. It's all it has been. This isn't the first time he's made a complaint about it. And he's been wide open about it, that he does not like surprises. And other arguments that the defense has had, they have asked for motions of continuances on certain things, whether it be deadlines or whatever the case may be. They've been asking for the goalposts to move back. And they have done it on the eve of which things are due many, many times. And when it has happened, Judge Hippler has said, no, he doesn't bend over pressure. He's like, you could have asked for this a long time ago. What are you trying to do by asking for it now? You know what I'm saying? So I love it, man. I love it. It's no nonsense. No nonsense. If the defense counsel was truly struggling with discovery review, the motion should have been made when the claim problem became apparent, and certainly should have been brought prior to the expiration of all discovery, all expert deadlines, and the final pretrial conference. Instead, defense counsel has robustly litigated this case, retaining approximately 24 experts and a full mitigation team, engaging in extensive motion practice and disclosing witnesses and exhibits lists with nary a whisper that continuance would be sought. These actions belie his counsel's ongoing and ultimately empty discovery complaints. Man, he's laying it down on them, saying that everything that they say has just been bullcrap. There's nothing there. There's no substance. It's just been nothing but complaints without any substance. I mean, we can go back to when they were complaining about the advanced timing records. They had Syray come out and say, oh my God, we don't have his advanced timing records. I met in a dark alley an FBI agent who was able to retrieve it at one point so many years ago. So I know they have it. And then AT&T comes forward saying, no, dude, we only kept it for 7 days back then. And law enforcement didn't know who Bryan Kohberger was for quite some time. I think it was about 4 to 5 weeks. It's December 19th. Murders happened November 13th. Well over that 7-day period, guys. Well over that 7-day period. All righty. So without more, the court can only conclude that the defense counsel is using the volume of discovery measured in terabytes as a tactic to delay the proceeding at the 11th hour simply for the sake of delay, rather than a legitimate threat to prejudice the defendant's substantial rights. Boom. That's true. I mean, that's everything we've been saying. I've been saying this for a while, that all of this has been a delay tactic, delay. I mean, how many people do you know that are innocent want to delay their trial? Think about it that way too. So let's go on. Perhaps even more problematic and more telling is that the utter failure of the defense counsel now or at any time to specify not only what needs to be reviewed, but importantly, when that review would be complete, a defendant ready for trial. Instead, the defendant seeks an unbounded continuance with no apparent plan to complete the review and of any unspecified evidence that counsel claims is yet to review. This is not sufficient to warrant a continuance. Man, yeah. Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger are getting spanked today. Those cheeks haven't been hit like that for a while. They should have been. All right, let's continue this. The defendant has not established a continuance in the necessary to conduct a more thorough life history investigation and identify necessary experts. The defendant next argues he needs additional time to investigate and prepare mitigation evidence. Specifically, the defense team claims that to be effective counsel must conduct an exhaustive and comprehensive dive into the defendant's life history. For additional mitigation evidence, analyze information into cohesive narrative, and for the jury to identify any additional behavioral, cultural, scientific, or mental health experts that may be necessary to develop the mitigation presentation. Despite having hired a mitigation team 2 years ago, defense counsel contends that recently discovered, I don't know, this is probably the red flags that they were talking about. Oh yeah, red flags that the defendant may have something. According to the defendant's primary mitigation investigator, attorney, so that's an attorney's name. I don't understand why an attorney would be redacted, but an attorney. Her team of 4 have been diligent in their investigation into the defendant's life history. Well, I'm assuming maybe if we figure out what the attorney's name is, we can probably figure out what the practice is and what their aim is. But I don't know. She believes that with time, she will be able to overcome these barriers. Man, I don't know what they're referring to by blank. So I'm assuming that there's something in his history and he's being closed off, right? And that he's got these walls up and he doesn't want to talk about it. And he being Bryan Kohberger, and she thinks that with more time she can break these walls down and get to the real Bryan Kohberger. Is that what I'm seeing here? I think that's what I'm seeing. The defendant has not demonstrated a continuance to accommodate further investigations constitutionally required. But going back real quick, I mean, if that's all it took for him to just delay this over and over and over again, then all he has to do is just never break, right? Just kind of sit there and just look blankly into the wall or to the ceiling. He's pretty good at that. And you'll never go to trial. You'll never go to trial. It's insane. It's insane. Let's see. Got a couple of, we got a $2.99 super sticker from Maury. Thank you so much. Serious Black coming in with $9.99. Thank you so much, Dan, for president. Like, for real. Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know if I want to do that job though. Shelly Stewart coming in with $7.99. Great news for the family. Justice for Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. Thank you so much. Thank you. You guys rock. You guys are amazing. I appreciate every single one of you guys that help out the show. It's truly, truly awesome. All right, so let's continue. The assertion that counsel needs a continuance to conduct an exhaustive and comprehensive dive into the defendant's life history for additional mitigation evidence overstates the extent of his counsel's constitution obligations. Counsel's investigation into mitigation evidence must be reasonable. The Idaho Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court hold the defense counsel is not required to investigate a defendant's entire life in order to present constitutionally sufficient mitigation evidence. The investigation defendants experts have undertaken over the past 2+ years far exceeds that in Roe. So they talk about Roe, and Roe is another case in which they had some issues. This was a death penalty case, and anyways, they had what Bryan Kohberger's team has already done is far exceeded what they did when they were arguing in Roe. Is basically all it says, and it says here that in fact, readily appears to satisfy the relevant ABA guidelines cited by the defendant. It includes, but not limited. So these are the things that they've done to investigate Bryan Kohberger's life as far as mitigation purposes goes. It says here the defendant's kindergarten through PhD education records, including coursework, interviews, and correspondence, defendant's mental health and medical records, including, that's redacted. I'm assuming that's probably going to be something recent and or something when he was a child. So one or the other, or maybe both. Records related to childhood car accident, defendant's employment records, mental health education and employment records of defendant's sisters, mental health records of the defendant's parents, fathers, military records, and social security records. Let me see. Okay. Mental health records for the defendant's parents. So that means there's like if that means they have records, right? So they have some sort of mental health issues for them to have records. I'm assuming if you don't have mental health issues, then you don't have records for mental health. Does that sound accurate? Now I understand why the sisters, because I think they're both in, or at least one of them is in the educational field of mental health. And I'm not sure if they have to go through a psych background or anything like that, like you do in law enforcement and for those type of things. Dr. Vona, if you're still here, I think I saw you earlier. Let me know if that's the case, if they do a background check for mental health records. I don't know. Father's military records and social security records, courts records from multiple generations of Kohberger family on the paternal side. Peyton comes in. You think he would have gotten caught if he didn't leave the sheath behind? I've got the ball rolling for law enforcement. No, I think he would have gotten caught. I know something that I can't really say yet, but I will. We just got to get closer. We got to get closer to the time of trial, but I definitely think he would have gotten caught. I think that ball was already going. I think somebody was on to him. And I think somebody may have, had he not gotten caught when he got caught, he was on the verge of getting caught because somebody was on to him. I'll leave it at that, guys. I'll leave it at that. But I'll be breaking that soon, hopefully soon. Definitely before August 18th. I'll be breaking that. So that way, when he comes out in trial, you guys know that you had heard it here first. But it's relatively big, in my opinion. It's twofold. I kind of talked about one part, the other show. This other part, I can't say anything yet, but it's big. All right, let's continue this. VA records and death certificates of maternal and paternal uncles, multiple interviews with defendants and each immediate family member, interviews of two of the defendant's fourth grade teachers, former boxing coach, and psychologist who evaluated the defendant in 2005. 2005. How old was he in 2005? So he was born in 94, wasn't he? I think he was born in 94, right? That make him 11? So yeah, that would have made him 11 when he saw that. So about fourth grade, that sounds about right. So I wonder if he had some issues in fourth grade that made him see a psychologist. I wonder. Interviews with the defendant's professor and advisor at DeSales University. It says professor and advisor, not professors. So I'm assuming that's Michelle Bolger, because she was one of the persons who was put in a one of those deals that they're going to have to testify, out-of-state testifying thing, summons out there in Pennsylvania. So I'm assuming that's who it is. And it doesn't say professors. So I doubt that means we'll probably not hear from Catherine Ramsland, which I find interesting, given that the course that Bryan Kohberger took with Dr. Catherine Ramsland was violent crimes. So interesting stuff. Let's continue. Interviews of the defendant's former coworker, interviews of at least one family friend. It's a family friend, not even a friend of his. Can you go figure that? It's a family friend. Did you see anything in here for Bryan Kohberger's friends? Did you see any Bryan Kohberger friend, period? Just one family friend, not even his friend of the family. So not by choice. They're friends of Bryan Kohberger through his family member. So interesting. Letters and jail calls between the defendant and his family. Interesting. It is evident from the reports of the defendant's mitigation experts, Dr. Orr, Dr. Ryan, and Dr. Brams, that they have developed an expansive understanding of the defendant's family. Environment, social development, history, family history, both nuclear and extended over multiple generations, educational history, mental health, and medical history. From this evidence, these experts have rendered several current diagnoses and identified other diagnoses which the defendant met criteria at some point in his life. Despite such extensive investigation, the defendant claims additional investigation is warranted to identify blank and blank. However, the defendant has not established such evidence or investigation is constitutionally compelled, particularly given the extensive work already completed. Rather, claims needed based on unqualified speculation by blank. I'm assuming it's probably that attorney that was blacked out earlier is probably the unqualified speculation. Or maybe it's his mom. Maybe it's Bryan Kohberger's mama who is the unqualified speculation of all these red flag issues that he may or may not have. You know what I'm saying? Know what I mean? That's what I'm thinking. The defendant has not offered any declaration of any of his disclosed mitigation experts opining the same, nor is he pointing to anything that their experts' reports would support blank speculation. What is it? I want to know what that is. Mommy issues. I'm thinking mommy speculation. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I can't tell you guys. Whoa, we got Natalie James coming in with a $49.99 super sticker. Thank you so much, Natalie. We appreciate you. I'm gonna leave this one up for a minute. Thank you. All right. So as noted, a continuance of trial is not warranted to chase down mere speculation that potential evidence exists. So where are we going with this, right? Because this is about the mitigation stuff. And then now they're going into that more potential evidence exists. Are they still talking about mitigation stuff? Because that kind of almost sounds like they were trying to get into, I don't know, like evidence of something that he can't do something or something in that it makes him incapable. I don't know. What are they trying to say? This is weird. Defendant has not set forth a plan to continue the investigation, how much time it will take, what his team expects the investigation will reveal, why it's necessary to uphold the constitutional rights of these matters are only now being raised with the court. Additionally, assuming guilt is found, the penalty phase of the case would not begin until late October or early November. Thus, there remains significant time for blank and her team. See, it's back to the lawyer. It's got to be the lawyer. It's got to be a lawyer. I don't think Bryan Kohberger's mom's a lawyer. So it's got to be an attorney and her team to continue their investigation and supplement expert disclosures warranted. Why would a lawyer need to be... Sorry about that if my mic was making noises. Why would a lawyer need to be redacted? You guys let me know in the comment section. Why would a lawyer need to be redacted? I don't understand that. Blank speculation that that defendant blank is simply that speculation built on circumstantial evidence. And it's all blanked out. Conditions which currently attributed by his own mitigation experts of his ASD, OCD, and or ADHD are consistent with childhood trauma, and there's evidence of poverty, both generational and familial. So again, remember when we looked at these red flags, and we were looking at the red flags, and we mentioned that poverty. Now, yes and no, right? So what they're saying is that like poverty, because if you look at certain places, like certain, how can I put this? So in poverty areas, sometimes you'll have people that will commit they'll either join gangs and all these other things, and so they create more crimes or whatever. You're more susceptible to those violent crimes if you're like in a gang neighborhood and things of that nature. That wasn't the case with like Bryan Kohberger, in my opinion. I don't know the Poconos very well. I don't know what kind of gang relationships you can get into, but he was involved heavily into drugs. And so he was into some sort of criminal activity when he was younger. Obviously, he was in heroin and some hardcore drugs. He also stole his sister's phone and got arrested for that. So he did have some kind of juvenile criminal activity. That is true. I want to say thank you to Mary Lynn for $19.99 super sticker. Thank you so much, guys. You guys are amazing. All right, according to, and then the rest of the paragraph is gone. Notably missing from blank's declaration is any indication as to how she intends to confirm her suspicions or how long she expects to take, be that months, years, or even decades. Defendant has yet to subject to multiple lengthy interviews by several different experts over the past 2 years. See, this goes back to somebody wanting to, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, break him down, get into him, figure out his inner insides, or whatever the case you want to put it. That's what this screams, because it says the defendant has been subject to multiple lengthy interviews by several different experts over the past 2 years. That tells me that, I think she thinks that she can do something that these other people can't. I don't know what their end game is. The defendant's family has likewise been extensively interviewed, and there has been no report that blank. None of the defendants have raised the alarm that blank, despite having same information, blank replies on. Is this some kind of like SA? Is he going to try to say that he was assaulted in some sort of weird way as a child or something? I don't know. A lot of redacted. Instead, it is an invitation for perpetual continuance. More importantly, aside from the blank, all of this information has been widely documented and record for months. Yet again, the defendant is now only moving for the continuance. Further investigation into blank unsupported suspicion smacks the tactical gamemanship and delay, absent more compelling evidence that blank planned for it. Covering it in a reasonable timeline to do so, there is no constitutional basis for further investigation, particularly on an open-ended basis with no plan to bring the matter home. Counsel's argument is more time is needed to investigate whether blank, likewise squarely unsupported. Defendant has never moved for an extension to his disclosure deadline for penalty phase experts so as to allow further opinions in this regard. Nevertheless, blank, who again is not even marginally qualified to opine, believes that there is evidence that and seeks additional time to unearth it. Her support, but she has not provided to the court. Again, none of. I wish I knew what they were talking about. This is, I gotta lie, it's a little frustrating. I don't understand why this is blacked out. I don't get it. I don't understand why this is blacked out. This doesn't make any sense to me. You know, this is, I don't know. Maybe the attorney's name is redacted to prevent an influx of calls and inquiries about the. No, I doubt it. There's so many lawyers already there. But I'm assuming they don't want to name her because she's not qualified. But how is that something that needs to be redacted? I don't get it. Again, not one of the defendant's blank experts who have had the same information has submitted a declaration stating that they may change their diagnosis based on further investigation. Rather, it's based on speculation that further investigation might change. Such speculation is not grounds for continuance. Yeah. The rest of it, we can't figure it out. So as it goes on to say, this tactic seemed geared towards achieving delay rather than a good faith effort in obtaining meaningful mitigation evidence. Moreover, the defendant provides absolutely no plan for how the further investigation will proceed or will be interviewed, for how long it will take. The Constitution does not demand, and this court will not willing to continue the trial indefinitely to allow the defense team to embark on a fishing expedition, pulling at every conceivable thread in the defendant's familial tapestry. I agree with him. At the end of the day, it's like, when is enough enough? He was 28 years old when the crime happened. You literally want to go through all 28 years of his life, including the 9 months of gestation. I think that's exactly what they asked for. But man, that's, how much time you want for all that? It sounds like you've gotten quite a bit. all the way from kindergarten, you talked to his mom and his dad. They're both alive. So you can get some evidence and information about how she carried Bryan, I guess. Was a pregnancy a bad one? Those type of things. It's not like his parents are deceased or he's adopted and doesn't know who his family is. It's all there. All right. At some point, and particularly after 2.5 years of an investigation, whoa, that moved on me. Where was I? There it is. At some point, and particularly after 2.5 years of investigation, the defense team must be satisfied with what they have, and which in this case is extensive. In addition, while the crime victim's rights is to a timely disposition under Article 1 and 22 of the Idaho Constitution, do not trump the defendant's federal constitutional rights. They provide an additional justification for the proceedings with the trial as scheduled. For these reasons, continuance is not warranted. All right, let's talk about the next one. This one's a big one because this is about the pretrial publicity. Defendant next seeks a continuance due to the recent inflammatory pretrial publicity on May 9, 2025, approximately 3 months before trial is set to begin. Dateline aired a 2-hour episode about this case. The episode included details and materials in which the case, if true, are not publicly available and which promote a narrative of guilt. The defendant also advises that on July 9, 2025, Amazon Prime Video is planning to release a 4-part docu-series about the homicides, and on July 14, 2025, crime author James Patterson is set to release a book he wrote about the same. The defendant contends that the media coverage is so close to the trial threatens his right to a fair trial by an impartial jury, which can only be ameliorated, what the hell that word is, by a continuance. In addition, the defendant argues that the continuance is necessary to investigate the source of the leaks to the media and impose accountability. Court does not agree with that. Either argument compels a continuance. So right off the bat, he's saying no. But let's see why. So defendants seek for a fair trial to be denied of pretrial publicity, which is not likely subsided within time. You know, I wanted to bring this up real quick, and I want to thank Chloe and I want to thank Deb out there, because they're the ones that kind of looked at this. So this is the Amazon click activity. And up here with this 22, 28, 45, or whatever numbers that you're seeing here, 22-2805, that number corresponds with evidence while it was at in Latah County, y'all. Not while it was in Ada County. So this is old. This is old stuff. And I said it, Psychic Daniel came through again. I told you guys that, you know, I said if I was a betting man, I'd say that a lot of the information that Dateline had, they had it for a while. I'd even say that they had a lot of it before the gag order was in place. And I'd say, I reckon to say that maybe even some of the stuff that they had, it came from people who aren't gagged. You know what I'm saying? But let's break it down. Let's break it down. Let's see. Daniel, are you surprised at how hard the judge came at BK and this doc? A bit shocked. I think he's tired of the bull crap. I think he's seen how Ann Taylor and this defense team has gotten their way probably with Judge, and he knows about the tactics. It's not his first time around. So all these things that are happening at the eve of when trial's supposed to start or after all these things, it's all signs that they're just trying to delay. And he's absolutely right. You know, maybe perhaps he is coming off a little hard, but I think he's doing it because maybe perhaps if he, you know, comes off hard, maybe the bull crap will stop. I mean, it's embarrassing, in my opinion, for some of the things that have happened, you know, to be one of your star witnesses called the conspiracy theorist, or, you know, when you argue something that you end up finding out that you were factually wrong, like that scenario. You know, in the end, they have dodged an alibi, and they've been able to dodge that alibi by giving, you know, little bits here. Oh, he was driving westbound in this direction, but we can't tell you exactly where at any specific time or place on that night and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe he's a little bit tough, but at the end of the day, I think he's just at a certain point, you know, being nice is, you got to get mean sometimes, you know, so that your point gets across. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case here. I don't think so. But I do think he's being very firm and strict. Now, when the leak came out, he was looking right at the prosecution when he said, I'm going to hire a special prosecutor that could even give immunity. We're going to find out where this came from. And he was looking right at the state. He put on there, yeah, here to the defense. He was looking at the state, and he had a problem with it. And so it's not all just been one-sided. You know, he was very forward and very blunt about it. And even in times when, in pretrial hearings where Ann Taylor will make an argument, and even when he says something about it, there's been times where he not necessarily argues with Ann Taylor on the stand, but where he's like correcting her on certain things. And then, you know, the state will go up there and do their side. Like the one I can think of is Miss Jennings, when he kept saying something to the effect like, you keep bringing up things, I'm going to have to give them their order. You know, he was being very direct, you know, to both sides. And so I think he's doing a fair job, and I think he's just calling out the bull crap. But I think he's straightforward, man. I think he's straightforward. Let's see. Didn't their first mitigation expert die at the beginning of this case? Yeah, there was one that passed away. That's true. All right, let's go. So in Shepard, relied upon the defendant, the United States Supreme Court recognized that adverse effect of inflammatory publicity on the ability to obtain an impartial jury, and strongly urged trial court to act quickly and forcefully In addressing such publicity, the court further advises that where the reasonable likelihood of the prejudice news prior to the trial will prevent a fair trial, the judge should continue the case until threat abates or transfers it to another county so that not so premeditated with publicity. So, he's got a few options if he feels that it's being prejudiced. And one of them is to move it to a different county. But they moved it here for this exact reason. Right? In Latah County, they were afraid that they couldn't get a fair trial, so they moved it to the bigger place. I don't think there's another place bigger than Boise and Idaho for you to move this trial to. You know what I'm saying? And things are coming out, and things are going to continue to come out. And so, I don't think it's going to, prolonging the trial is not going to help, in my opinion. I think more information is going to continue to come out. I've got some information that I'm dying to drop. I know there's going to be some information on Amazon that people are dying to drop. I know somebody else that might come on the channel and break some information, some really big information on the channel. He's been on the channel once before. You guys can kind of figure out, maybe. But I got some stuff, but we'll see. This statement from Shepard, however, must read in context. The media coverage in that case is far different from the present here. In Shepard, news reporters extensively covered the story of Sham Shepard, who was accused of bludgeoning his pregnant wife to death. The court examined the extensive media fanfare surrounding the case, noting Shepard was not granted a change of venue to locale away from where the publicity originated, nor was his jury sequestered. So right there, by him putting those two things in, tells me there's a good chance that this jury is going to get sequestered and the change of venue already happened. So Psychic Daniel coming in, the jury will most likely be sequestered at some point in this trial. Do I think they're going to sequester him for the entire 3 months? I think that's unreasonable. I think that might be unreasonable. During certain times, maybe towards the end, I think that we'll probably see that. I definitely for deliberations and those type of things, but for him to put out there, nor was the jury sequestered, tells me that it is definitely going to be a sequestered jury. In addition, only 3 months before trial, Shepard was examined for more than 5 hours without counsel during a 3-day inquest, which ended in a public brawl. The inquest was televised live from a high school gymnasium, seating hundreds of people. Furthermore, the trial began 2 weeks before a hotly contested election in which the chief prosecutor, Mahon, and Judge Blythen were candidates for judgeship. So, yeah, obviously not the same thing as with Bryan Kohberger. None of those things are relevant in the Bryan Kohberger case. Birdie comes in saying, 199, happy to be here. Thank you for the coverage. I appreciate that. Thank you, guys. And I'm going to be covering the case too. The trial. So make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell, because I'm going to go live every day of the trial. We're going to watch this trial together and break it down. And so it's going to be, we now know the date. Court found there was no doubt in this deluge of publicity reached at least some of the jury. Given that the jury was questioned for only the time, 2 jurors admitted open court to hearing highly inflammatory charge that the prison inmate claimed Shepard was the father of her illegitimate child. All right, so it goes on more about that. That's not really necessary for this case. If months of virulent pre-trial media coverage was not enough to deny due process in Shepard, it is certainly not enough in this case, where the media coverage has been far less pervasive. In addition, the court is employing the measures recommended in Shepard to protect the defendant from prejudicial pretrial publicity, to wit, 1, limiting the number of reporters in the courtroom during the trial; 2, insinuating prospective witnesses from interviews with media about their prospective testimony; 3, making an effort to control the release of leads, information, and gossip to the press by police officers, witnesses, and counsel for both sides, to avoid the disclosure of inaccurate or inadmissible information to the public. Ultimately, whether the defendant can receive a fair trial depends on whether a fair and impartial jury can be seated. I think they're in the right place for that, I think they're in the right place for that. They're in the biggest county, so you're not going to find another county bigger with less impartial people. So let's just get this show on the road. All right, let's continue. The court observed that Sixth Amendment guarantee of a speedy trial is one of which the government and society, as well as the accused, has a claim, and stated in society can not be utterly deprived of the right of the right to prosecute and try someone for a crime within a reasonable time merely because of the widespread community knowledge. Here, there is no assurance that the pre-trial publicity will fade within time. The murders occurred over 2.5 years ago. The circumstances of the murders were provocative. 4 college students in a small college town were brutally stabbed to death in by an unknown perpetrator. It was an immediate media sensation and garnered widespread attention that not only continues to persist but continues to grow. I 100% agree on that, statement. And as I mentioned before, I think that was part of the motive. A lot of people say, "What is the motive here?" I think part of the motive was to create a large, high-profile crime. Now, how you do that, you have to have the mystery involved, right? Now, whether the mystery was going to be he was going to take the lives of 1, maybe 2 people in the house, with a house full of a lot of people, or abduct somebody from the house, take them out, and then, they ultimately meet their demise somewhere else. They were still inside of a house full of people. It's a lot of questions, a lot of people to point fingers to, you know what I'm saying? And that would make things a lot easier for somebody like that to get away with it. Or you have multiple victims, mass murder, middle of the night, especially with something as personable as a knife. You have attractive, young, beautiful people. Those are all ingredients for a very high profile crime. And I couldn't help but think that, when you had so many vehicles parked outside, when you had new vehicles that were parked outside, if this guy was thinking about just committing the perfect crime, you'd have to have the perfect situation. And I'm not sure that falls under that line. Now, if you are wanting to make this, a mass casualty type of situation and create a large, high profile crime, well, then it really doesn't matter whose car is parked out there, because he was probably going to go 1 through 1. You know what I'm saying? So I think that had a part into it. The fact that there was a high profile crime aspect to it. All right. 18 months ago, the defendant moved for a change of venue from Latah County due to part the extensive inflammatory and pretrial publicity and allegations made about Mr. Kohberger to the public by the media that will be inadmissible at trial. He argued that Latah County was not large enough to avoid the bias caused by the persuasive judicial publicity. The defendant's motion was granted. As a result, the trial date was continued by approximately 10 weeks. So we already know that it's been continued once because of this, because of the movement of trial. It should have started, I believe, in June. And so it's already been moved by about 10 weeks. So excellent point. Excellent point. Those additional 10 weeks have not resulted in fading media attention. It has only given the media more time and opportunity to provide more coverage to the public audience, which is clamoring for answers, which is 100% true. The longer the public is made to sit and wait the facts to come out at trial, the more time there's for inflammatory, speculative stories, movies, books to circulate, and more time for prior ones to be rebroadcast, purchased, viewed, and consumed by the public. Proceeding with the trial as scheduled will likely avoid negative consequences from future publicity. Very true. Very true. Thus, the court finds the continuance is not warranted based on the media coverage. Rather, carefully, a patient voir dire is prescribed. Continuance is not warranted to investigate the leak of information. The defendant also asserts that a continuance is necessary to accommodate the special prosecutor investigation into the source of leaks to the media and impose accountability. With regard to the Dateline episode, the defendant points out that Dateline represents that materials came from sources close to the investigation. Notes that Patterson's upcoming book on the crime promises claims to be the most comprehensive narrative of the investigation and the evidence to date, and is based on over 300 interviews of several individuals, including 300 interviews. Wow. Based on several individuals, including victims' families and local law enforcement. He also notes that Amazon Prime docuseries promises to be told in a captivating, tense, and emotional, wrenching detail by only those individuals involved in and affected by the crime. He urges that if any of the leaks came from the witnesses that the state intends to call from or others involved in the investigation, the information is Brady material because it would serve to impeach the leaker's credibility and may be exculpatory in nature. He adds that if the investigation reveals other state agents had information about the leaks but failed to disclose it, the omission would constitute a Brady violation. As noted, a continuance is not warranted where the information sought thereby is mere speculation. Defendant's Brady argument is built on a house of speculative assumptions. An assumption that there was a leak by a person bound by the non-dissemination order. So, is it possible that somebody released something? So let's talk about the 11/12 video and audio, right? The non-dissemination order didn't go into effect until Bryan Kohberger was arrested. I have no doubt in my mind that Dateline was out there day one after this went public. And we're out there trying to gather information, talk to people. So if that was the case, then that would be before the non-dissemination order. And I think they may have probably got, I don't know this to be true or not. I have no idea. I have no idea where Dateline got any other information. None, zilch. My speculation is they got it from the source. That's just my speculation. I don't know that to be true. I just, I know that was the case when it came to the Linda Lane footage. He's not under any, Brady order, or not Brady. He's not under any gag order. He hasn't violated anything. The guy that owns the Linda Lane footage that released it, he got paid for it and he still released it. And he didn't violate anything. Because when he released it was, I think, before, I think it was actually after his arrest, but he's not part of the gag order. So I think that's a huge component to it. Let's continue. So, an assumption that leakers will be found, an assumption that the leakers were law enforcement, an assumption that the leakers or others would be, or others who maybe were complicit will be testifying in government witnesses, an assumption that these witnesses will likely be material. Such assumptions are not grounds for continuance, particularly given that there is no guarantee if and when they will be confirmed or debunked. That just kind of tells me that they're probably already having problems. That he already knows it's going to be very difficult to find. And I think that's what he's basically trying to say is that it sounds like where this leak came from. If I had to take a guess, my speculation, I have no idea. I don't work with Dateline. I think I've been targeted by Dateline once. I'll be honest. And so they did a hit piece on me and the guys a long time ago. It may not have been Dateline, it may have been somebody else. But I don't work with Dateline. I don't work with any major, I don't know. But if I had to take a guess, and this is just my guess, I would say that the person that leaked this is probably somebody outside of the state of Idaho, maybe in the state of Washington. I'd say it's probably a Fed. I have my reasons behind it, but I think it's probably a federal agent out of Washington. I don't know how a, gag order in Idaho would affect the Fed, in Washington. And I don't know if they got their information from directly one place. Now there is some stuff that makes you go, hey, like these Amazon click activity, these pictures that's being released. Somebody had to have access to that at some point. You know what I mean? I guess would probably be a Washington Fed, but that's just my guess. That's just my guess. I have zero ideas. Zero. Such assumptions are not grounds for continuance, particularly given there is no guarantee if and when they'll be confirmed or debunked. This trial cannot be held hostage indefinitely to an outcome of the investigation, particularly given the very significant chance the leakers may never be discovered. That tells me they tried looking into it, and there's a good chance that as much as he was upset about it, they're probably not going to find anything. Thus, the court will continue the trial pending the result of an investigation based on speculation that it will be successful and hope that the impeachment evidence may be uncovered as a result. Based on the foregoing, defendant's motion to be continued is denied. Man, we've been waiting a while to say that one, guys. We've been waiting a while to say that one. Thank you, Extreme. I appreciate that. But we have been waiting a while for that one. We're going to trial, guys. We're going to go to trial. And here's the amended scheduling order. So the court's prior scheduling order is amended as follows. Sealed proceedings with the court and counsel will take place July 28, 2025 through August 1st. Jury voir dire will commence on August 4th, 2025 rather than July 30th. And continue until a jury is seated. Its estimated trial itself will begin in the opening statements, will commence on August 18th, 2025 and continue until completed. So August 18th, guys, make your travel arrangements. If you're going to go out there, call your agents, let them know you'll be in. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. and I'll be airing it every day. I do plan on going out there. I'm gonna try to get out there for the verdict. That's my plan, guys. I got to see with some. Long story short, I know a lot of you guys are aware I had an arm injury. Well, I'm fixing to go back to full-time work, and so I got to get that situated. But I intend on going at least for the verdict and for closing arguments. That's my goal. That's my goal, to be out there for that. And so I got to make my travel arrangements. But yeah, everything's been denied. Everything's been denied. We're going forward, guys. August 18th. You guys got any questions? I'll be here for another. I'll do a 5-minute real quick Q&A. Send in your questions in. Put a couple of stars, and I'll see them. Bella says, now BK will ask for a plea deal. I doubt it. You know, I think he's gone this far. I don't know. I don't even know if. I mean, I wonder if we'll find that out after the trial, because I know that a couple of hearings ago, there was a situation. A couple of hearings ago, there was a situation where the judge asked, if there'd been any plea deals. So I wonder if we're going to find that out after trial, if there was any plea offerings from the prosecution. I don't know if they would tell us if there was one from the defense. I don't think so. I don't think that's something that, I don't know, maybe that is something that said, hey, we'll take a plea if you take the death penalty off, and it was denied by the state. I wonder if that's a possibility. I don't know. Those things are above my pay grade. I don't know. I'm not the legal guy like that. First day is August 18th. How long is it supposed to last? 3 months. 3 months is what they said. So August to September, September to October, October to November. Middle of November. I don't think it's going to go that long, to be honest with you. Was the death penalty removed? Nope. And he's still going for it. What was the technical reason for the week delay? I think there's a court hearing, another court schedule during that time. And so it's basically it. Let's see. They can try to plea open the judge, but then there are no guarantees. They don't have any leverage, so probably won't. Huh. We'll be left with a lot of questions and no answers. Probably not. I think we're going to be giving a lot of answers to the questions. And I think that not so much that. I think there's going to be a lot of confirmation in this trial. A lot of people have questioned certain things, like, for instance, his phone being off during the trial. Not everybody's watched every pre-trial hearing like I have and have read every document, right? So, everybody has lives and stuff. There's no way. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that I was off work for the last few months, I probably would have had a hard time reading all the documents myself. But one of the things that we know from the documents and from pretrial hearings is that Bryan Kohberger manually turned his phone off. It wasn't, out of service. It wasn't the battery died. It was manually turned off. And you can tell that because phones log that information. When a phone is turned off, it logs in what the battery life was. It logs in what the service was, where you were at, things of that nature. And so they didn't have that at the time of the PCA because he wasn't arrested at the time that they wrote it. The PCA was written so that they could arrest him. After they arrested him, they got a warrant for his phone and were able to determine those things. So I feel like we're going to get a lot of those type of things. We're going to see, like, for instance, they say that Bryan Kohberger's defense team says there's no history or connection between Bryan Kohberger and the victims on social media. Well, we already know that he implemented some forensic cleaning stuff into his phone and onto his computer. We already read just recently that there are gaps in memory on Bryan Kohberger's phone. And so those gaps are probably, if they weren't factory reset and things of that nature, is probably where you would find much of the evidence that, we were looking for, the social media searches, following of the victims, those type of things. And so we're going to find those things out. And we're going to get more clarification of what they mean, what it was exactly that he was clearing out, the programs he was using, what those programs were designed, those type of things. Because, that one on his work computer, forensically deleting things from his work computer on November 10th, I think 11th. It's pretty interesting stuff. But I think we'll have a lot more answers and questions. I think it's a pretty solid case, to be honest with you guys. It's a lot of it's circumstantial because there's no video, there's no blood DNA or hair underneath the victim's hands or anything like that. But you got a lot of strong circumstantial evidence mixed in with your concrete evidence. The DNA on the knife sheath that was left behind, I think that's a big piece of evidence. When you look at pictures of the house from nights before, you see the reminiscence of a party. You see beer pong table, you see red Solo cups, you see beer bottles, you see food, you see a bunch of things lying around. Now, one of the things that we know is that there wasn't a party there. We know that neighbors in the neighborhood talked about how eerily quiet that neighborhood or that night was. In fact, one of the neighbors talked about playing Minesweeper for days that night, just going on the Minesweeper. I love Minesweeper. It's one of my favorite games. It keeps my mind sharp. But that she noticed during her game of Minesweeper that it was eerily quiet. Why was it eerily quiet? There was a lot of other parties going on. Sigma Chi had a party. There was another party that Hunter went to with his twins or with his triplets, with his sister and his brother before going to the Sigma Chi party. It was a homecoming game. Maddie and Kaylee went to the corner club. So there was nobody at that house for that party to have happened like that. So you can see those things. So that tells us that the night before, we knew there was a party and there was a large amount of people because there's pictures and stuff. In fact, those photos that Dylan was editing were from the night before when they did have a party, where you did see where all those things end up happening, the beer pong and stuff. And so what does that say? It says that they didn't clean up not that they didn't clean up very much, but they didn't clean up very much from that time. From the time that they had the party to the time that they went out and, throughout that night, there was still a bunch of stuff out. So I should tell you that they didn't bleach it. They didn't clean it. There's going to be a lot of DNA in that house, a lot of stuff in that house. So what do you do? Well, then you have to concentrate on the item that the killer brought in that wasn't there the night before. And that was the knife sheath that had a abundance of skin cells underneath the button snap. So that's the reason why you focus on that, not on the first floor handrail, because I know there's a speck of blood on that. But there's no evidence that the perpetrator ever went down to the first floor. I think that's what they were trying to get Bethany to trip up on. Remember when they were asking Bethany to go down and testify during one of those pretrial hearings? I can't remember what it was called. Starts with a P, I think. Well, anyways, remember they were trying to get Bethany to testify because she may have heard or seen something. They were trying to see if she heard or saw that person maybe went down the first steps. Did you ever hear footsteps on the first floor? Because if they can somewhat get her to say, yeah, maybe there was footsteps. Maybe I heard somebody go down the first floor. Then they can try to throw in that blood that's on that first floor handrail. But if she said, no, I never heard or saw anything, and Dylan saw and heard people from Xana's room and on the staircase and walking right in front of her, everything was on the second floor, then there's no evidence or proof he ever went down to the first floor. There's also latent footprints that I'm assuming is going to show more than just one footprint. I'm assuming there's going to be a few. So be interesting. I hope we find out if he's Papa Rogers. That would be interesting. That would be. I think there will be battling of experts. No, because right now the only expert, maybe, I guess, I think they're going to have some DNA experts. Well, I know they're going to try to, one of the things that they're claiming is that there was multiple weapons, multiple suspects, right? So you might have an expert coming in that's going to testify on the injuries, blood splatter, and those type of things. Try to indicate that maybe more than one person was there. That might be an expert that you might see some contradiction with. I know Cy Ray, he was going to be somebody that was going to say that Bryan Kohberger's vehicle was traveling in an opposite direction or in a different direction than towards SR 277 the Pullman Highway. But there's another road that goes around that road that puts you right in front of it, right back on that highway, right before you get to Floyd's Cannabis Shop. So I think it's a bunch of crap. But I think that's it. I mean, maybe they try to get the phone expert to try to say something different about the forensic deleting stuff and why that'd be important. But I think that's it. I don't think there's going to be a lot of battling of experts. What about a real alibi? We're never going to hear it. We're never going to hear it. How many witnesses for the state? Don't know. I think that stuff's been sealed. That stuff's been sealed still. And they say if this will be live streamed, I believe it is. I believe it is. It's going to be streamed the same way that it has been. Do you think he will ever give less fake alibi? Nope. Nah, I don't think so. Unless somebody, no, I don't think so. I was just saying, unless one of his Kohberger fan club members comes forward and says, no, he was with me, but he already said he was by himself the entire night in his car. All right. So nobody else can come forward and say, oh, I was with him. Then you kind of screw yourself there. Let's see. I'm going to go through these pretty quick. Put a couple of stars, guys, if you have some questions for me. Do you think there will unseal anything else before trial? Probably not unseal anything, but I'm going to break some things before trial. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Do you think the knife was or ever will be found? I don't think I don't. At this point, I don't think it's been found. I would say, will it ever be found? Maybe. Maybe if I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, he'd have to go through his. Maybe if he went through his appeals process, right, which could take a long time, guys. I mean, years, decades. Let's go through the appeal process and he loses everything and he has nothing else. And maybe he's not important or in the media anymore and he's not in the limelight. There's nobody talking about him. Maybe he'll confess to where it's at that point. But I think that's it, you know? I think that's it. Do you think he'll ever take the stand or speak at all? I think if it's not going well for him, he might. I think he might if it's not going well for him. And I think he's going to want to, I think his narcissism may think that he can convince people. The facts are that D&D is huge, not a sloppy person with no education like BK. Shows a lot. Also his car, too clean. Speck on the knife sheet speaks volumes. The facts, there are no D&D. What's D&D? Is a huge, not sloppy person with no education, like shows a lot. Too clean. A speck on a knife sheath speaks volumes. Who's Papa Rogers? Papa Rogers was a person that was on Facebook that was saying some things like he thought that the killer left the knife sheath behind before that was revealed. He was getting argumentative with people. He stopped responding to people after Kohberger's arrest, which was weird because he got some things right? And he was argumentative towards people. You would think of a person that was that argumentative and that was right on so many things would have been gloating. But no, he just kind of disappeared. So a lot of people think it's him. The thumbnail looks eerily like Bryan Kohberger. It's kind of weird. And apparently ChatGPT also thinks it's a 95% chance it's Bryan Kohberger. The one thing that kind of bothers me about it is that all of the comments from Papa Rogers are before, like, I think there's one after 10 p.m., but all of them are before 10 p.m. And this guy was like a guy that was up all night. You know what I'm saying? Now, granted, after 10, he was probably driving around looking at the victim's house and stuff. So maybe not online. But I would have expected at least something like at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, because that's when Bryan Kohberger was also awake. And when you're awake and you can't sleep and those type of things, insomnia, arguments, I would expect them to be on there at that time. That's the only one thing that kind of sticks out to me that says, yeah, I don't know if it's him. It's just that the timing in which he, most of the times when you look at the responses, like during the day, there's a handful at night, but nothing past 10. I mean, most of them are during the day. And that was one of the things that just kind of made me think, I don't know, maybe, but it made me a little bit more hesitant because of that. Will you break some things now and give us a little something? I talked about Howard Bloom's book and how in his book he says that Bryan Kohberger's father flew from Seattle to Philadelphia and then from Philadelphia to Seattle and then from Seattle to when was it? From Seattle to Moscow. Now I looked it up. Only Alaskan Airlines fly directly from Seattle or from Philadelphia to Seattle and from Seattle to Moscow Pullman Airport. They're the only flights that do it. And from what I understand is it's quite a bit more expensive to fly into Pullman than it would be to fly into Spokane, which is only like an hour and a half away or something like that. So, pay a lot of extra money to do so. Family that's kind of broke. I asked Howard Bloom, I was like, what do you think about that? His family was broke. His dad just drove across country to drop his son off and fly back. What do you think about him flying into Pullman? So clearly he was concerned about his son. Well, we'll see how concerned he is. I got some more information about that, and I'm just kind of waiting on. But we'll see. Have you heard anything about Bethany seeing somebody putting something in a bag? I have not heard about that. I've heard the rumors that she saw a naked person, but the document said that DM is the only person to have seen the intruder, only person alive to have seen the intruder. So I don't think she saw the intruder. Now, I know a lot of people pointed that out to say, well, I think that means the DoorDash driver didn't see Bryan Kohberger. Not necessarily. If she saw Bryan Kohberger, it would have been outside of the house, not while he was intruding in the house. So I don't think that would have been classified as an intruder if he was in his car when she saw him. You know what I mean? Let's see. DNA. Oh, no DNA. Okay, so there is DNA. There's quite a bit of DNA on the button snap. Now, there's more than just DNA, right? So you have the description from Dylan, who is vague, but it still doesn't exclude Bryan Kohberger. You have the vehicle that's outside. You have his phone off during that specific time of hour. It's pretty strong there, with just that alone. Then you have, the times where he's going through his phone and forensically clearing them out and doing the, he also purchased the K-bar knife. I forgot about that. Purchased the knife, purchased the balaclava mask, purchased the backpack. Those things are all missing. The Dickies suit, that's missing. All his kill kit is missing. There's more than just there's no DNA. Now, if you look at the Corco case, can't think of his name. There's a guy, Rochester, New York, I believe, drove 3 hours in a Jeep, took the life of his father. The way he attacked his parents. He attacked him with an axe. He stood over his father while he was in bed and over the top with an axe. Got blood everywhere. Then he struck his mom. Mom survived. Mom ended up identifying him while she was going into the hospital or whatnot. No sign of a cleanup, no sign of anybody taking a shower, no sign of any of those things. The guy gets in his Jeep and drives 3 hours back to his college dorm. No blood in his car. Not a drop, not anything found anywhere in his car. And so how do you do it? Well, apparently he was a vet technician, and at the veterinarian hospital that he worked at, they performed surgeries. And so they had equipment there that would protect doctors and surgery technicians from getting blood and guts being splattered on them when they do an operation. And so they they concluded that he ended up going with a suit and put one on, went in there. There was no sign of forced entry. He ended up using the code because it was his parents' house. He used the code. Now, what DNA did they use to catch him? You may wonder, because they did find DNA and they used it to capture him. It was actually his DNA on a, I think he paid out a toll and he got like a receipt or something and threw it in the trash or something of that nature. And that receipt, they found it. And they found his DNA on it. And so that proved that it was him in his Jeep driving the 3-hour drive. He was on camera, going there, coming back, leaving his DNA there. And so for that, and he ended up getting found guilty. So yeah, just because there's no DNA in his car, from what I heard, it sounds like it's because there was cleaning agents, and we're going to find out those things. Like I said, remember there's some questions and then we're going to get some answers. I think those are some of the answers we're going to get. We're going to find out that there were some cleaning agents. We're going to find out that Bryan Kohberger was cleaning his car extensively throughout that entire 7-week period. I mean, the whole 9 yards. You know what I'm saying? I mean, a lot of people look at Dylan and Bethany and say, oh, man, they cleaned up the house. They had done something. They had 8 hours. People say, oh, man, that's plenty of time for them to do so much in 8 hours. Bryan Kohberger had 7 weeks with his car that nobody was actively bleeding in. Nobody was attacked. And so if he were to remove the clothing in which he was wearing while during the murders, you know, including the balaclava mask, which protected his head and face, then that would deter the amount of bodily fluids and DNA that he would be able to transfer from one place to another. And that's also not indicating that maybe perhaps he put on something. Who's to say he didn't step into another hazmat suit or a jumpsuit? That way it would have contained everything inside of the suit as he took off. And those things are all possibilities and plausibilities, but we won't know until the trial. Won't know until the trial. But obviously, in my opinion, 100% they got the right guy. There's so much evidence against him, it's not even funny. All righty, guys. Well, that's going to do it for me tonight. I'm going to be back on tomorrow. I'm going to actually be on Dr. Vona's channel at around 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. And I'm going to be directly on her channel. It's not going to be a dual stuff. So if you want to catch me, we're going to talk about the Bryan Kohberger case. You're going to have to check out Dr. Vona's channel, Bright Minds with Dr. Vona. And then afterwards, we're going to come back here. I'm going to talk a little bit. If there's more Bryan Kohberger to break down, I'll talk about it. But right now, I plan on talking about Liver King and his arrest and his threats to Joe Rogan. You don't want to miss it. I went through all of the videos. I've downloaded them so you guys don't have to. Some of them are disgusting. It talks about taking an enema and laying on the side of his bathtub or on his shower and defecating on himself. I don't have that in there. I edited it out, but I watched it because in between the times that he was talking about that and chewing on bones, he was talking about Joe Rogan. And so I went through all those stuff. I highlighted the parts that were relevant. We'll watch those tomorrow unless something else breaks in the Bryan Kohberger case. But until then, until next time, guys, you guys have a safe night. We'll see y'all then. Peace.
But it's too late now. I remember you and me, and how careless we could be.
All day and all night, we'd stay up, it felt so right. We were so young, we were so dumb. We would get drunk and then hook up. We were okay, we were alright, staying awake till the sunrise. We were in love, couldn't stop us, like a good drug, never enough.
We hook up in my car, driving so far, play you guitar, you'd show me your art, let down our guards, think with our hearts, stare at the stars, we were never apart, drinking too young, way too much fun, out in the sun, orbit when it's gone, took you to prom, dance to our song, dance all night long till the lights come on.
Late now, I remember everything, and how careless we could be, and how careless we could be.